Morning, everybody. How are you today? Beautiful, another beautiful Friday. Don't you love the way I always give the weather report in the morning? Like, who cares? I can turn on the weather for that. I don't need you to tell me. But good morning. Michael will be on with us here in a second. He has a couple of things, so he'll be kind of in and out with us today. But if you've tuned in because you've seen our ads for this week, you will know that we are having our V1SUT Substack blogger on today. And she's been with us previously to talk about drag queen performances in, and I always want to say Blackwell, and then I always get it wrong, in one of our northeastern cities here in Oklahoma. And she's just done, and before even that, she started out doing some phenomenal research on just Oklahoma political history. And that's kind of when she caught my eye. Everybody was going, "Oh my gosh, have you seen this Substack? It's just, she knows so much stuff. This is great." And so kind of reached out to the author, and it has been, she's just one of those people that just really works hard to get the information out that she's researching, and she does a great job researching. And so I'm not going to talk too long about that this morning because she's got so much to tell you that we want to talk about. So I'm going to bring on V1SUT with us this morning. And how are you this morning, V1SUT?
Good. It's very good to be back with you again. I always relish the chance to talk about education with the rope team.
Well, and we just so appreciate you. You know, you don't have your logo, right?
No, but I'm getting ready to put up slides if that's okay.
Okay, no. Let me take these out and let me get your slides up. So hold on just 1 second.
Okay.
And then we'll add those. There we go.
Far more interesting.
Yes. Well, so let me, if you don't mind, let me go back just a second and can you tell me, because I love this story, so it's for me.
Okay.
Can you tell me why you're called V1SUT?
So the V1SUT Vantage is the Substack blog, and the wider umbrella is V1SUT. It is actually an acronym. The whole thing was sort of started, you know, I've written for other publications under other names and freelance journalism, but this was an opportunity to tell some of the truths that weren't being told. And for those of you who read scripture, whenever Jesus's words who are in red, and he's trying to break it down to what's important that you may have missed and you really need to know, he says, "Verily I say unto thee," before something that's important. So it's an acronym for that, just a shout out to things that we really need to know about. And that's sort of the focus area of the Substack, is things that are really important to families, children, education, politics in the heartland, the things that really affect everyone.
And truth. And it's all truth. On the basis of truth.
Absolutely.
You know, and it's funny because, and I want to say this before we even start, when I first saw your writing, I thought, oh my gosh, how does this person know all this stuff? And I was reading going, okay, well, all of this is stuff that is true that I know, and I even wanted to catch you on something. So I went and looked up a couple of things that I didn't even know. And I was like, wow, so I'm fortunate enough that I think I have and I hope I have the reputation of being, a truthful reporter, somebody who, reports the truth and doesn't, um, hyperextend themselves into things. And when I have an opinion, I'll say it's an opinion. So
Exactly.
I hope that I hope that the fact that I respect your work so much, I hope that does help even just a little bit, because your work is phenomenal. So I'm going to shut up. Michael, do you have anything other than good morning, Michael? How are you? I can't hear you because I turned your mic off. Hold on one second.
Muted my mic. I see where I stand in this podcast. Yeah, no, good morning. And I'm so glad we have V1SUT on here. I mean, to me, they are just an absolute hero. And I told you, I think last podcast I said, it may not look like it, but we are winning. The grassroots, the real Americans, the real concerned citizens, the Christian conservative type people, we are winning. And it's because of people just like V1SUT who, probably wasn't needed 10 years ago or 5 years ago, but now it is. And as long as we don't take our foot off the gas, we're going to win, in my opinion.
I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. And I think what's interesting about this adventure with the Visit Vantage is the feedback of the majority comes in the form of behind the scenes, which tells you that the vast majority don't really even feel okay to comment publicly. That's the media space that we're in now. But their feedback, we always make our email address available on our pieces and publications so that they can give that feedback. And it's been phenomenal. When you give people truthful information and you link back to the proof, whether it's court documents or school board minutes or things that they can actually sink their teeth into, they're very appreciative, because then they are able to verify that what they're reading or seeing is true. And we just don't have that. Even in local media in Oklahoma, people are shocked about the story we're going to talk about, because they thought, if this is happening in Oklahoma, this has got to be happening everywhere. That was really the national response. But what they don't understand is that even our TV affiliates, our major newspapers, this story really showed how they will work very hard not to let the public know the salient facts that they need to know.
Or I'm even going to go one over that, and not just not let the public know, but then because they know it's true, the truth, right? So what they'll do is they'll just obfuscate the truth, or then they'll talk over you. They'll call you a liar, or they'll say something else, just to obfuscate the truth. And so, I read a few of the comments on this last post, and I can't figure out whether these people are legitimately so brainwashed, like we talked to Alex Newman that one time, and he basically said, you can't argue reason with people who weren't ever taught reason in the first place. They were just, propagandized essentially. And I don't know if that's where they are. They're in that space where they just literally can't use their own thought process to kind of work through this thing. And so they just, emote it all out, and, well, that's just not true. Well, but look at what you're doing. So anyway, enough of that. Please, we're going to turn this over to you.
Okay, great. Well, let's start talking. Actually, a month ago today is when this publication broke the very first story about a man named Dr. Shane Mernon, who was recently hired as the head principal of John Glenn Elementary School in the Western Heights District. And for folks who are listening who aren't from Oklahoma or not that part of Oklahoma, Western Heights School District is a public school district. They serve about 2,700 kids, so it's not a big place, but it is more of an urban district. And this isn't to be critical. This is just based on data. They are a historically failing district. It's been a long time that the children there have not gotten the education that they deserve. So this district hired him as a principal, and what our publication broke was that not only was he a practicing drag queen in a local gay bar theater here in Oklahoma City called The Boom, had several shows there weekly, that kind of a thing. He, in 2001, while he was a public school teacher in Stillwater, Oklahoma, he was a 5th grade teacher at Stillwater Elementary School, was arrested and charged for having child pornography on his computer. So many would make this just about some kind of attack on the LGBT community. It is not. It's about child safety. And people were really stunned. So the response to this was very national, and overwhelmingly people were saying, how does this person even have a teaching certificate? The images on his computer were, and I won't go into graphic detail, but they were of boys engaged in sex acts. And there was some kind of report of concern.
Wait, hold on 1 second. Boys. So you're not talking like over 18.
Well, that's part of the conversation here. So as soon as the story broke, the charges were actually for possession of drugs, which ended up to be marijuana, and possession of child pornography. His devices were confiscated. And about 2 weeks later, the OSBI had to be involved because images had been deleted, and the OSBI recovered images of what I described. He was arrested, and actually through a little bit of a process, he resigned from the school, which is, a bit telling in itself. He had a very, very good attorney, and that the legacy media will tell you charges were dropped. There wasn't enough evidence. His record was expunged. Let's not talk about this. But he had a very good attorney, and the attorney argued that two things: that the DA up in Payne County couldn't prove that Murnin had actually possessed the images. So Murnen's story in court documents, if you dig through those court documents, is that he was online late at night, 2001. There's no indication about what platform he was on, what the discussion was on. And someone just said to you something to the extent of, I'm paraphrasing, do you want to see some pictures? And so that they were sent to him, they automatically downloaded, that kind of a thing. Okay. So the attorney was arguing that they couldn't prove that he had possession of them. And then secondly, there was no way to prove that the boys in the pictures were minors. And this is an ongoing legal loophole, that this isn't the first time this has been used. This has been used across the country. There seems to be a lot of energy in the defense of people with child pornography, but very little effort to find out who the children are involved in those images, who are maybe repeated victims, and just using it to say, we don't know who that is. We can't prove that they're minors. So there were actually 3 judges involved in this case. The first one dismissed based on those technicalities. The DA up there, we've got small Payne County. They were in there swinging and fighting, trying to protect kids. So they appealed. The second judge reinstated the charges. And he said, I quote, "It is clear from review of the pictures that they do represent child pornography." So now Murnin's going to be prosecuted for the pornography charge, child pornography. And then a third judge, because Murnin's attorney again appealed that decision, dismissed based on these technicalities. But if you read the court documents, it suggests that he was very reserved about it. He didn't feel good about the decision. He said in court documents, "It is my personal opinion that you," meaning Murnin, "should be nowhere around young children."
Oh, so goodness. Okay.
The charge for child pornography was dropped based on those arguments. But then he served a very short probation period on the marijuana charge, and his record was expunged by 2003. Yeah. So he retained his teaching certificate and went on to be hired by Little Axe Public Schools, which is a small rural school out by Lake Thunderbird, if anybody knows about that. Then he went on to Oklahoma City Schools and was there for quite some time. And then just recently worked his way up and was hired as a principal. at John Glenn in Western Heights. So,
Okay, can I just ask, back up? So
Sure.
when was this original charge in Payne County again?
The original charge was in 2001.
Okay,
And
thank you.
there's been a lot said in legacy media about that was a long time ago, but this person wasn't 18 at the time. He was 30 and he was a 5th grade teacher. So parents overwhelmingly have expressed to the publication and a lot of the outlets, this has been picked up in a lot of places, just a lot of concern about child safety, about hiring practices, about, what does it mean to have a teaching certificate? What's behind that? They're starting to ask questions about what that process is, and maybe the bar's too low.
Well, let me interject here, because I know you've heard this as well, and I think it might not be a bad time to kind of stick this in here.
Sure.
Part of the problem that we've had with coaches, for example, and teachers who have been taking advantage of their students in sexual relationships, when you go back and you look at these stories, they've been in the system for upwards of decades sometimes. And what ends up happening is nobody wants them at their school, but nobody wants to fire them and get rid of them. So they just end up going here and there and all, to all these different schools instead of just being ejected from the system. And I've never understood that. I don't know if it falls under that liberal ideal of we can't fire somebody, it will hurt their feelings. I mean, I don't know if that's where it lies. I know that they have scared employers because we're, for years, and have said, well, if you fire a teacher, then they'll come back and they'll sue you for it. I know when I was a teacher, there was all of that kind of stuff that was said. But still in all, they threaten you with your job on a frequent basis. So this is an ongoing problem. I mean, would you agree, Visit?
I would agree. And I will tell you, I've learned a great deal over this we published the 4th story this week. I've learned a great deal about what's happening behind the scenes, because there are, and a lot of what we're going to talk about today focuses more on the activist teachers who seem to have control of the microphone. But there are a lot of very good and concerned teachers who have tried to bring up concerns about hires that might be a risk to children. And I'm learning more and more about the role of attorneys in public education. And the attorneys, everything that I'm learning about it would suggest that they're not on the side of child safety being the first priority. It's much like the teachers union role. We're doing a lot to protect adults in this system. And there's a lot that I'm learning that moves against protecting children in the system. So I would agree with you on that. I think the script has flipped, where 25 years ago, we would have found somebody else that was more appropriate. Now we're very afraid to let people go because it's a very litigious teaching group that we're dealing with here.
Well, and I also wonder too, they've said over and over again, we have a teacher shortage. We have a teacher. And sometimes I wonder, and I wondered when they first started pounding that into our brain, because it was so often said, that I almost wondered if that was kind of the way they get away with some of this stuff, is they throw up their hands and say, well, but we couldn't hire anybody else because there's a teacher. You know what? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I think having the teacher shortage, and it's very real that we don't have enough teachers to plug those holes. We can see the data, we can see the numbers. Most definitely is causing districts, particularly the ones that nobody's running to, the good teachers aren't running to teach at these districts, with people that they otherwise wouldn't. And how is that affecting both education and child safety? So I think it is a real part of the formula of how we got here.
Yeah. Well, and Jenny, when you have kind of administrators that promote this, whether they're at the superintendent level or the principal level, that's where like our kind of what we're investigating in Edmond, where you have an employee, Snapchatting children, but it's already been reported by a good teacher, good employee has already reported it to their site administrator, and the site administrator just sweeps the whole thing under the rug. So you have those layers in administration that cover up for these people.
Oh, and at Western Heights, nowhere is that more apparent that from what I've seen or reported on than at Western Heights. I think you just hit the nail on the head. And a lot of it, you get to a point where there's a certain infiltration at all levels of a very progressive ideology. And now you'll see when we talk a little bit more about this, that where the employees are coming from is a very different place. Western Heights, let me go back just a minute because I don't want to miss this. At the same time in the first article, this isn't a person who's keeping his life separate. There's an argument that, hey, do what you want on your own time, which, I mean, that's a valid argument in the US of A. Under the Constitution, live your life as you want to live it. But there is an absolute mix of this person's role in education and this person's role as a drag queen, and a pretty prominent one, very much out there. So Myrnan actually started and headed a drag queen story hour organization to spread drag queen story hour around. And we've included video from, he was partnered with the public library over the pandemic. And so the books that they're reading are gender ideology that is age targeted.
We actually broke that story, by the way.
You did. So I may have used something from you in there. So I thank you in advance.
Sorry.
So this person was definitely doing that. And then the other thing that was really concerning is, so people like Myrnan have their social media as him and their social media as their drag queen persona, as almost two separate people. But he was actually advertising and posting for staff to hire at Western Heights to work with those elementary school children as his drag queen self, on his drag queen social media. So you start to think about, we're hiring from a very different pool of people here. And is that safe? Is that okay? Do parents get to weigh in on this conversation? So there becomes, exactly as Michael is saying, more and more infiltration at every level of people who are in agreement that there's no standard of conduct outside of or even inside of the classroom now that should be unallowable for teachers.
Well, and let me say this too, after you did the first piece, I went out and looked, and the other argument, I think, that just completely wipes out that you get to do what you want to do on your own time argument. Sean Myrnan, at least the way I saw it, and if I'm wrong, please, correct me. But the way I saw it, Sean Myrnan deleted his personal Facebook page when all of this, you started drawing attention to him, but then left his drag queen page up. Yes, you're correct. So then if that's the case, then tell me then that would indicate to me that his regular persona, Sean Myrnan, I mean, the person isn't as important to him as his drag queen persona, because he wanted to get rid of the Sean Myrnan one. But boy, that, Chantel, that one, we couldn't get rid of that one.
You make a really good point. And I want to just stop for a second and say something about a comment I just saw come in about the school's response to this, that they are locking parents out of the John Glenn building now. So the district's response, which I'll kind of take that first here, is concerning. It's they've taken down the staff pages to be able to contact staff in the district for those of us looking to see who else might not be appropriate. They have locked down the building. Parents cannot go have lunch with their kids. They cannot be in there to see what is and isn't okay. So that in itself has been super concerning. I mean, I understand the public response to this for a district has got to be overwhelming. So the post you see on the screen right here is that a group called Libs of TikTok, who typically they post what more liberal people put out there of themselves in TikTok videos and things, but they picked up the story. And I knew that we had crossed over another line. It got 10.6 million people have viewed just that one post. And it was picked up by national outlets. It was picked up by a bunch of independent outlets. So we knew we got to start listening to parents here. They're very engaged with this. We've crossed a line where parents were assuming that when they'd see these snippets of very activist teachers that they would never want spending time with their children, that would be revealed that someone with their head screwed on straight in district administration was going to take care of these things. And with Shane Mernon being a principal and that information coming out, they really lost yet another level of trust with public education, because now that person not only is not going to take care of it, he's running the building. And that was a very frightening thing for people. There was actually a little poll that someone attached to this particular post about should this person be immediately terminated. And I definitely temper it with, these are people that are looking at libs of TikTok. You'll see some responses from people who would have supported him, but very few. 96% of the people out there said he should be immediately terminated. Yet you look at
96.
Yes. And then you look at the media response, and the legacy media response was pretty funny. It said a lot about the media cycle. First of all, they delayed. There was a couple of days where everyone, the more conservative outlets, the independent outlets, picked it up and pretty much picked it up verbatim with all of the facts in the article. And then, one local TV affiliate picked it up and basically said, well, it's a long time ago. It was those charges were not real. There was a lack of evidence. They were
yawn. They just yawn at it.
Right. Or
it's
even
yawning.
Even failing to mention what the charge was. And then from there, the national legacy media picked up their story and ran with that shortened version of it.
Right.
So you learn a lot about how information is and isn't disseminated right now. And that's got to be really frustrating for parents who are having to trust people with their children in this. But the district response was, really just as crazy. They came out and said, they doubled down. They backed him. They said he's qualified. They got pretty political. They said that the current state superintendent had just reapproved his certificate, as though now districts are saying they have no other responsibility to research anything else about a candidate to make them appropriate to work with children. So that part of it has been interesting. I think there's a lot of people now looking at in their schools, who's there, what's the process, what's their lifestyle like, what are they teaching children, and are they safe?
Well, let me say this too, because this was, earlier on, I was telling you I'd forgotten something I wanted to ask you. So I remember when, and I've got another thing, somebody's texting me in while they're watching the video, and they had a point to make too.
Okay.
When we first started teaching, when anybody first starts teaching, you have to fill out the FBI forms. You have to get your FBI, background check, all this kind of thing. And the schools will say, we have our educators are, FBI background check, blah, blah, blah. Well, it wasn't until I was a mayor once when I learned that the FBI background check really isn't that great. And do you know that what you could do, which just astounds me. So, that this is a purposeful thing that these schools are doing, hiring these people. It's purposeful. It has to be. Nobody can be this lazy, because really all you have to do is go out to OSCN, which is the Oklahoma State Court Network, and look. How much of the information did you find on Sean Mernon on OSCN visit?
Some, but you bring up some really good points. Because
better than nothing. And how much did it cost you to get on OSCN?
Oh, absolutely nothing. And there's a discussion about public information here, and it really is, which is something, at Reclaim Oklahoma Parent Empowerment, a quick guide for parents to know how to.
We should.
Sort of
That's a
quickly
good.
And publicly check who's around their children. And this is not just about public schools. It's about, non-school sports. It's about lessons that kids are taking. It's about church camp. It's about all of those things that parents need to be able to do that. I think you bring up a really, really strong point. And someone else here brought up a point that I don't want to let pass by, talking about how public schools are sort of cherry picking when they are mandated reporters. What she's talking about is the state's law that mandates every person that if you suspect any form of child abuse, you are mandated by law to call the child abuse hotline and report it, which is Oklahoma Department of Human Services Child Welfare, which we talked a little bit about this when we were talking about Bartlesville and their battle to sort of keep kids away from public drag performances.
Right.
That technically our state law says exposing children to adult sexuality is within their definition of child abuse and neglect. It is state law, but somehow we don't seem to care when it comes to these things, or we've just chosen not to apply it, or no one sort of has the conviction to stand up to it and apply it. So I think that's a great to Dana out there.
Well, and they'll take, DPS will take your kid, or CPS will take your kids away from you for something like that. But then they'll let a person in a classroom teaching 30 kids have that kind of a background. So, something's massively upside down.
Well, and that's the problem here also is where are child predators going to go? They're going to go where the kids are.
The kids are.
I mean, and they're being protected now in the public education system. And unless parents just completely revolt, if this guy, I mean, there's some characters in my district, but if this guy was in my district, I would literally be relentless at that school almost every single day. I mean, they'd have police staked up there because I would not allow this guy to just freewheel and do everything. And you know what? On top of that, if I dressed up like this and I went to a park or my local neighborhood where there's a bunch of kids and I just start taking out books and reading and doing this kind of stuff, I'd go to jail. They'd come and arrest me and I would go to jail.
Good point.
It really is. And to your point, they have circled the security. Immediately, I was getting information from parents saying they have law enforcement cars there. There's a bit of protecting the school. So I will say this in the district's response. They haven't given any formal statement as to his employment status into Shane Mernon's employment status at this time. But I have a very reliable inside source that said the district and the school board placed him on paid administrative leave, assuming that it was going to be a temporary situation. And the assumption was that the media cycle was going to pass. But as Michael said, this is serious and this is about people's children, and they haven't allowed it. Parents haven't allowed it to pass. They've continued to push. They've been talking to policymakers and representatives. They've been continuing to make this bigger and bigger, and the state superintendent has responded. So it hasn't gone away. So the latest information that I'm getting is he's on paid administrative leave for the rest of the year. So there's that line between those attorneys saying we can't possibly fire someone or say that we've made an inappropriate hire, and we're going to pay them out through the rest of the year. And teachers and administrators here are almost all on the 1-year contracts. So that's how they're going to slide this out.
Okay, so let's just for the cheap seats in the audience again. How is he paid? Who pays his salary?
Taxpayers and parents. Yes,
yeah, but that's
exactly.
That disconnection. That's that disconnection where there's no real true accountability in the school districts because they're not state employees. They're their own entity that is governed by their superintendent, and our only inroad is through that superintendent, and they just shut us out most of the time. I wish we could really bring in an accountability aspect into these schools.
Yes, and I will tell you, as these stories have moved along, and we'll get to that here in a minute, the role of the school board and starting to look at some point, this becomes not about Western Heights anymore. It's all of these districts that are doing things. We have some very similar characteristics that are happening with school boards, that are happening with administrations, that are happening with attorneys. So we will definitely get to that, but I'm going to move along so I don't take up all your time. So
we'll have you on for 3 hours, so don't worry about it.
Okay. So about a week after the first story, we dropped the second story, which was not a big surprise. If you are advertising on your drag queen website for school employees at an elementary school, we've probably got some other people in the mix that parents should know about. So a second person who performs as Carmen Devereaux, the drag queen, his name is Paul Stafford, was hired and approved by the school board to work at John Glenn Elementary as a kindergarten class aide. So this is where we really start to see that this is systemic and this is intentional. Both Murnan and Stafford are involved in gay pageantry through an organization called the US of A, which is a national organization. They both appear at the Boom, which is a theater and gay bar on the north side of Oklahoma City, have known each other for a lengthy period of time. And then we definitely started to dig in and see that he had worked for Murnan before. Murnan was in Oklahoma City Public Schools immediately preceding his hiring by Western Heights. And he had Paul Stafford as an aide there as well. This picture that you're looking at is in one of the common spaces. I'm assuming it's the gym at Prairie Queen Elementary School, which is in Oklahoma City Public Schools. Shane Murnan was serving as an assistant principal at the time. And you see Paul Stafford and the woman in the picture, her name is Tiffany Tuggle. And she is there giving an award to Paul Stafford. So this sort of shows how these people are able to build a resume of credibility within these public schools where it makes it harder for them to be fired. So this group, and the other one is Paul Stafford's partner, who is also a drag queen at the same facility, the same bar, performs there. So they hire in like-minded activist people, and then they give them awards. So now suddenly he comes highly recommended. He's won this award out of 41 paraprofessionals at Prairie Queen Elementary School that year, which would have been the last school year. He was named the top paraprofessional.
Okay, so let me interject something really fast. So on the screen right now, you see it's looks like a Facebook post, right, from Tiffany Tuggle.
Yes.
Okay, so congratulations, Carmen Devereaux. So this woman literally uses that man's drag queen persona, tags his drag queen persona in the post, which speaks exactly to what you said.
Exactly. And the woman who's putting this post up, she was an instructional coach at that school at the time. And she also performed at night at the Boom Gay Bar in their production of
what in the heck?
The Rocky Horror Picture Show.
How does nobody get that this is, you know, it's going to get me in trouble to say it, but you know what? At this point, I don't really care. I'm too old to care. This is like a groomer thing. I mean, I don't see how you don't get that this is grooming. I mean, I can see the perspective that, you know, oh, I'm in this, I do this thing. And so here are my friends. And I don't think there's anything wrong with my friends, because I don't think that there's anything that that I'm doing that's wrong. It's just a lifestyle. It's what I do, so I can see that perspective. But those of us on the outside, to me, it looks like literally we're creating schools that are like groomer schools if this is what we're doing, because this is completely insular and feeding on each other.
Well, and I think for parents, one of the reasons that this really has blown up is you can see that this is a very open inside secret. These people are posting in their world. And, we have our silos on social media. I'm not looking at drag queen sites. Most parents aren't looking at drag queen sites. They can do this for years and take over a school, essentially control of policy and awards and decision-making and hiring in a school without parents being at all aware. And when these people are hired, parents are having no input about those hirings and no information about backgrounds and lifestyles and criminal records that don't meet that actual bar that would keep you from renewing your teaching certificate or working within a school, a background and fingerprint check. What we have to understand is most people who seek access to children for nefarious reasons haven't yet been caught. They're not in the system. Yeah. So a background check for certifying a teacher or a paraprofessional or someone working within public schools should always be, and I think parents assumed, was just a baseline starting point. But we're seeing that it's not. They're using it as full justification that someone's appropriate to work there. So at the same time, we definitely saw that in this article, there was an upcoming school board meeting coming, and that staff within Western Heights Public Schools were putting out the call publicly for activist groups to be involved in that meeting, which really speaks to, who's controlling policy. And that's what made going to that school board meeting very important, to see what exactly was happening. What is the interaction with people? Who's in control and who's really using their seat and their power to represent parents. And it didn't go so well. But in between those articles, there was another one that dropped on this 13th of September. Back in the original article, on top of the child pornography charge, the drug charge, there was a very mysterious affidavit of probable cause, like a probable cause filing out there, as Jenny said, at OSCN in the state court record system that anyone can access. But it was linked to nothing. It had been sitting there for 3 years. It was in 2020. It didn't say what the charge was. You couldn't see anything. So that is when law enforcement files something. They've arrested someone, and there is ample evidence for a district attorney to move ahead with charges. So you usually see those pop up, and then something else immediately follows them, like they're taking action on this. But this one had nothing. So I have to give some credit here to, I'm a big fan of independent media. There's another Substack, and they've been around for a while, but now they've moved to Substack, called Redux, REDUXX. Check them out if you have a chance. A young reporter named Yulia Alma was able to get a hold of some documentation about that had been previously withheld, but somehow they're coming from far away. She was able to get it. And if you read her and Redux, they're a pretty good researcher. Their site is actually, they call it pro-women, pro-child safeguarding, and anti-BS. They consider themselves true feminists that are protecting women and women's spaces now. But she was able to find this filing by the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, did the arrest. And Shane Mernon, on September 16th of 2020, in the wee hours of the morning, was swerving lanes in a very populated area of Oklahoma City, near Pennsylvania, in between about 11th and 23rd as they followed him. He was pulled over by the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. He was extremely intoxicated. In Oklahoma, a 0.08 blood alcohol level is a DUI, and a 0.15 is an aggravated DUI. He was a 0.23 blood alcohol level. He gave officers his debit card, not his license when it was required. He was unstable going back to the car. He identified himself as a principal at Prairie Queen at the time, but could not tell them where that building was located. But somehow, some way, there's no record of him having been charged with that. So this moves into what is happening with judges and DAs also being perhaps steeped within that system of
well, let me just interject on that too. So when I think most people know that we filed a lawsuit on behalf with Bryce Chaffin in Stillwater, in Payne County, over the fact that Stillwater Public Schools ejected Bryce Chaffin for speaking against boys and girls bathrooms, that particular policy. And he was using scripture, and the school board was just going ape on him. They would interrupt him every 3 seconds. It was just crazy. Anyway, they finally ejected him using a uniformed police officer before his 3 minutes was even up. He was only at 2 minutes and something. So long story short on that, the very first judge that we got basically found for the school, even though he reviewed all of these things. And it later came to our attention that many of the attorneys who work in that area had suggested that he was an activist, a liberal activist judge. Mm-hmm. So if you think, parents, by any stretch of the imagination that we don't have an inherently a judicial system that's now inherently been sucked in by people who don't have your best interests at heart, because, diversity, equity, and inclusion, to them, that's everybody's best interest, but they're not understanding, how these policies actually play out. So, if you've never researched a judge and you've never voted for a judge, or you just always vote to retain a judge, a lot of this is lying at your feet. And I'm just saying, because that's where this happens. Sorry, I had to admonish people.
No, it's a great point. And I think we assume we hear things about Atlanta and Chicago and places that might have a radical attorney general or district attorney who refuses to press charges. But rural Oklahoma has a huge problem with this. Bartlesville, Oklahoma, their district judges historically run unopposed, and that power has been misused. Now we have this layer of activism that they openly say judges should not have to follow the law. Judges should use their own judgment. It's a frightening thing. There's actually a case that everyone should be watching. That's a Hayes versus Pinkoski that's now at the state Supreme Court level that threatens everyone's right to speak and everyone's right to exercise their freedom of religion. And it's about to be a very big ruling that came out of sort of the conversation about public drag and children in Bartlesville. So there's some things on our publication about that. Everybody needs to watch that because it's exactly what Jenny's talking about. But back to Shane Mernon and this DUI, there's really only two possibilities legally for this. An aggravated DUI in Oklahoma carries a mandatory sentence, and it wouldn't have allowed for the short probation period that it could have disappeared this quickly. So it was either somehow pled down outside of the law or never charged, but we don't know. We don't have access to that information. But we do know that Mernon, who honestly, he was out at 2:30 in the morning on a school night with a 0.23 blood alcohol level, and he was due to be at school at 7 or something. He didn't miss a step. This post right here is from the very next day following his arrest. We're back, your Thursday night party at the Boom, Thirsty Thursday. So I won't read into anything into that. That's not factual. I think it speaks for itself, but there's something going on here that wouldn't apply to all citizenry, is what I could say. But also in this article, Mernon, he broke his silence, and he broke his silence after, the breaking of this first article and some national attention, to a publication called Non-Doc, which it's interesting when people who are more on the activist side speak. They won't speak to people like me, I could tell you that. And the most revealing thing, there was he was a victim in this, and there was a lot about, trying to erase LGBT people, which I'm not hearing any of that from parents. But in the article, he revealed that during this time in Stillwater, when he had been arrested on the porn charge, during this period of his life, he was, if you put together articles that have sort of covered his drag persona through the years and pieced together these things that he said publicly, he was coming out as gay. He was a 5th grade teacher. He had stepped into the drag world in Stillwater. And in the Non-Doc article, the recent one, he said he was attempting to adopt a small boy, knowing that at that time in our state law, a single gay man was not legally allowed to adopt. The publication asked no follow-up questions. It was left as someone turned me into them. He basically says in the article, which I just find fascinating, he says, they never asked me if I was gay during the adoption process. I went through all of the parenting classes, all the background checks, did everything, and they just never asked me if I was gay, so I never told them. And so right before the whole adoption was certified, I was going to get to pick him up. One of my coworkers, I found out later, had called them anonymously and told them that I was gay. And so they terminated my adoption, and I lost my little boy because she hated me because I was gay.
Okay, so we have to stop right there. So this is the thing that I object to strenuously. I mean, I can say strenuously, and it doesn't even cover how strenuously I object to. I think that both of you would agree, similar to me. I don't care what you do. You do you. I'm a Christian. I would prefer you don't. I'm happy to talk to you about Jesus, but do your thing. But you cannot allow that behavior to in any way be exposed to children. You simply can't. So if you want to be able to say, hey, I get to do, or I can do, or whatever, at some point, we have to just see through all of this. Oh, poor me. They took my son away from me, blah, blah, blah. Enough. Do we care about adults or do we care about children? Because I think most of us are concerned with children, and we're fine to let you do whatever you want so long as you leave the kids alone. Am I wrong on that?
100%.
No. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I was just going to make that point also. As a parent, it's not just my job to protect my kids. I mean, yes, that's kind of my first role is to protect my kids, but in doing so as a parent, we have to protect all kids. And,
Right.
and when we, as parents, if we don't fight back, if we don't do something, this whole thing is like a double-edged sword. Yes, Visit is exposing this guy, these actions. It's coming to light. People are getting upset. Some things are happening, but in the sense of double-edged sword, it's promoting to that entire community that they can get into these schools and they can be protected and they can do what they want to do and prey on these kids.
I agree. And well, equally concerning, probably the most concerning thing about that non-doc article to me, besides the fact that if you know anything about the adoption process, there are home visits, they're interviewing around that family. There's extensive background checks. It doesn't sound plausible that someone did not ask about a single man's sexuality.
And let me just interject. We adopted 2 children. We've been through the adoption process, and I can verify that 100%. There's no way that they wouldn't have known that.
Well, it's clear from the article and from his words that he knew that it wasn't legal for him to adopt, but he was moving ahead with it anyway. That mindset that the law does not apply to some people can be taken in so many directions.
Yep.
That I think that's one of the most concerning things about the story. So moving on, the last article just dropped this last Tuesday. And this is where we really talked about the school board meeting and looking at this more through a lens of what's going on with these failing schools. So just to tell you, Western Heights, if people don't know, in very recent years, their accreditation process with the Oklahoma State Department of Education had fallen so low that even those activist person in office could not ignore it. They were at a level where the only place to go down was for the state to take over decision-making for the district. And that did happen for about a year. They spend 27% more per student than the state average, but only 7.6% of kids are proficient. If you look across
how many?
7.6. And by the time they get to middle school, elementary school being so foundational, things like 3rd grade reading levels are a target. If kids don't make those 3rd grade proficiency reading levels, the academic slide just accelerates. And by the time they get to middle school, academic achievement, which is another state indicator that can be compared to other districts, it measures how ready a child is for the next grade level or what's next in their education. And by middle school, it's 3% in Western Heights. So we have to start talking about, instead of these very emotional arguments about who hates who, we have to start talking about data and what's really happening in kids. And every single class that goes by is another sector of kids in this 2,700 student district that will not be self-sufficient. So we really start to look at what is it about these chronically failing schools, and we got into the school board meeting. So the school board meeting, as we told you, Kylie Keeling, who is a instructional coach at Western Heights within the elementary school, put out the call for activists to be at the school board meeting. And I will tell you, when she did that, she used a gigantic Western Heights logo as though she was authorized by the district to do that. So we were kind of waiting to see if there would be some disciplinary action about that. She put out to Oklahoma City Pride, which is They're not headquartered or located in Western Heights District. This is a gay activist group, which good for them. Do your thing. But what does this have to do with Western Heights? So she put out a call saying, what she said was, "Hi, OKCPS peeps. I'm an instructional coach." This didn't go to Oklahoma Public Schools. It went to Oklahoma City Pride. I'm an instructional coach at John Glenn. My children attend there. Our principal, Dr. Mernon, is being targeted by Ryan Walters. It was a very, very political, if you can come speak at the meeting, basically kind of a thing, which unless you live in the district of Western Heights, you're not speaking at that meeting. Also, it went out to Oklahoma Educates. We know about them, right?
You mean advocates? Advocates? Yes. Oklahoma Advocates?
Advocates, that's it.
Yes.
It went out to them. And what that is it's a Facebook group of teachers. It's over 60,000 strong. If you go read it, definitely tends toward the progressive side. It was started by a gentleman during the teacher walkout time. And that gentleman, it was how he coordinated getting teachers to the Capitol, that entire protest. Shortly after that time, he was arrested and convicted. He was convicted of child sexting with a child, but the other charge, there was a plea bargain that dropped the forced oral sodomy charge on him. So this popped up from very activist roots, and you would think that they would have pulled that down immediately and started over with a legitimate teacher's voice platform. But that group also was called to show up at the meeting, and they most certainly did. The meeting was filled, and it was filled with a lot of activists, a lot of teachers wearing shirts that supported Mernon. Most of the speakers were teachers, which brings up a point that I want to talk about in a minute about teachers who are staff at a district at a meeting that is supposed to be for parents to be allowed to have input about their children's education, really intimidating and boxing out parents. They 3 different names that they called who had signed up to speak either didn't show up or didn't rise to speak because it was that intimidating in the building. But the folks that were there, teachers spoke, and we outlined what they said in the article, all very much pro Dr. Mernon, and they were his people who had worked for him for all of 3 weeks that he had been there. There were also, what was most concerning was there was a woman there by the name of Jenny Archer, who was probably the most applauded of the speakers. And she indicated that she was a certified teacher. She'd been an assistant principal. That's how she sort of labeled herself. But she's actually the pastor of Evolve Church in Oklahoma City, not within Western Heights District. And it is a LGBT inclusive church that the image that you're seeing here, the cartoon image, that is their main image on their Facebook page. And their goal is in the deconstruction movement, which is tearing down Christianity, public schools, anything that doesn't accept every lifestyle. The picture that you see, the top picture, that's from their website. These are the people that are involved at Evolve Church. It involves all fetishes, all sexual attractions, the pup community. If you're not familiar with the pup community that wear the dog faces, and a lot of times there's a lot of S&M involved with it. It is a grooming effort aimed at young men who do not have experience in gay male sex. There's some pretty concerning influences here, but a group of teachers and advocates that were fully merged at that meeting roundly applauded her, and they know who she is. The other one, the picture at the bottom, that's actually the pastor on the left who spoke. That's Shane Mernon, as Chantel Mandalay in the middle at another function. And the woman on the right is Sarah Cunningham, and she is with a group out of Oklahoma City called Free Mom Hugs. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but yes. She has a gay son and has become famous. This is her job now. And she positions out into public that if your parents don't support whatever your lifestyle is, I will be at your wedding. Now she will perform your wedding. I will step in. It's a family replacement for any family that doesn't completely agree with every decision their child or young adult makes. So the board meeting was extremely intimidating for parents. And the most important thing I want to say about the board meeting, a woman stood up who was the last speaker very bravely, and she was a constituent of Western Heights. And while she was speaking, she mentioned about her concern about teachers union, and the crowd started to laugh across the crowd, very disrespectful. When the crowd, as Myrnan supporters spoke, were silent. They were very respectful. Then she continued to speak and spoke about her concern about a drag queen kindergarten class aide being allowed to work at John Glenn. They began to mock and to laugh so loudly that it shut down her comments. No one on the board stepped in. The superintendent didn't step in. And finally, a constituent in the audience stood up, turned around, and shut them down and said, "No one treated you like this when people spoke in support of him. Please stop." So it said
So the superintendent who was sitting there,
yes,
and yet did absolutely nothing. So it was left to a person in the audience to shut down. And let me point out, are we not told that we're bullies? We are bullies, and, we're horrible. And, the whole Sean Vernon, thing in non-doc, he's a victim. We're just so mean for, fill in the blank. Why is it that is always said, and yet every place you go, those of us who are not involved in that lifestyle are the ones being respectful, and the ones that are involved in the lifestyle are the ones being disrespectful of anybody who disagrees? So this whole bullying notion, I'm done with that. Done with it. If you're not wise enough to understand it's that whole "I'm going to call you what I'm doing to put it off on you" thing, then you're it's like Pee Wee Herman, "I'm rubber, you're glue, what bounces off me sticks to you." And that's how adult all of this is. So no, they're not being bullied. They weren't being bullied in that meeting, I'm sure. Everybody was quiet when they spoke, but then when somebody else has a competing philosophy or wants to bring up something else, they shut them down and they bully them. So the real bullies here are the ones involved in the alternate lifestyles, not the ones of us who are just trying to get along.
Well, it's interesting because Dana Mooney in your chat box just said, wasn't there an announcement about being civil and respectful of everyone made? And yet when parents were mocked and ridiculed and nothing was said by the school board or superintendent, there actually was. They always have the very politically correct announcement at the beginning. And what I'm seeing more and more, buzzwords come and go in progressive ideology, and bullying and peer pressure were used to sort of consolidate, create positions. There are bullying experts. That's been faded away because now bullying and peer pressure are being used by the adults who have gained the power. So it's much like the term gender ideology. I don't know if you're aware of this, but you interviewed a mother recently that I also have spoken to, whose child was brought to a behavioral health treatment residential center for help with gender dysphoria. By the time that child left, she had figured out that they said they would help her with that. That's not a word they use, a term they use anymore, because now you have to affirm everything. So they won't even admit that that's a diagnosis anymore. That's exactly the flip that sort of happens with this power consolidation and their toolbox for keeping that power. So super concerning. Another thing at the meeting, and we had several people there who were observing from before the meeting started. There was one individual who's in district level administration there who was very much coordinating where legacy media stood, where what these sheriffs were doing outside. He was scurrying back and forth in a bit of a panic. So we really needed to know who that was even part of. There were some street preachers and protesters outside, and there was a huge discussion about whether they could or couldn't on public property voice their First Amendment freedoms of speech. So it was very
there
odd.
isn't a discussion about that. If it's public property, you're automatically granted your First Amendment right.
Well,
So
it
that's
wasn't
just the way it is.
It wasn't that clean that night. So I will tell you, this person really came into quick focus. His name is Dr. Chris Culver, and he's in charge of secondary education and communications for the district. On the side, in our article, we talk about he does communications for the US of A pageants.
Okay.
The Mr. Gay America, Miss Gay America, that both Myrnan and Stafford are involved in, and is extremely involved in that organization. So we're at the point where we see vertical infiltration from the classroom to this school principal level, now at the district level of decision making. So these people, he was in the room. He also did nothing to quiet a crowd that was berating a constituent who was expressing her sincere concerns about their hiring practices. So that part was pretty disturbing.
Well, can I just interject here quickly? I asked, but I'm going to do it anyway. Sorry, visit.
Okay.
Do you remember when we broke that story on Sean Myrnan reading doing the
Drag Queen Story
Hour?
I do.
Drag Queen Story Hour at the Oklahoma County Public Library. Well, it was one of a couple of sisters who follow us who brought this to our attention, and I did a video with her. It's been 3 years ago now because it was during the pandemic, and she had her kids sitting in front of the computer. It used to be when we were kids, the library was a great place for summer reading, and you would go and they had these great, hold on just a second. Oh, sorry, I got involved with, so Laura Wood Parker, it really did not bother me. I wear it as a badge of honor, knowing I was triggering them on the subjects that they're sensitive to. The other trigger point was when I asked parents to have conversations with their children. And if anyone at school tells you not to tell your parents, teach your children to run home and tell their parents. I mean, that's great.
Yeah. So Laura Parker there was the constituent speaking when the mocking and laughter was not controlled by any board member or administration.
Way to go, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah. So anyway, what I was going to say was, because this directly goes to what you're talking about. So we did an interview with her about the children's reading program at the library. And basically what was happening is she would get on, or the kids would get on, and this box would pop up and basically lead them into alternative sexual lifestyle books and that kind of thing. And so we did a whole thing on it and showed the screenshots and that kind of thing. Well, we kind of put our heads together and thought that the best thing to do would be to write some letters to the Oklahoma County Library board, and talk to them. You can find them on web. And so she wrote several letters, and, then they decided that they were going to go speak in front of the board. Well, once we started making a big deal out of it and the interview got out and, I wrote about it and that kind of thing, now you had exactly what you described. They go and they put it on this Facebook Pride page. And so what ended up happening was there were 15 or 16 people who showed up at the public comments on the Oklahoma County Library board meeting for the month. They showed up, and so my friend and her sister, both of them are friends. Anyway, they tried to speak. And so what happened was they were heckled. The other people talked over them when they were talking. You can go see. I mean, I think we still have the video from that online. It was absolutely tragic. And this is exactly what's going on. So it's a complete effort. They put it on this website, and then I guess these people don't have jobs, or they only work at night in these gay bars. I don't know. But then they show up it en masse when everybody else, because they always have these meetings at inopportune times. The library, Oklahoma County Library Board does. They're like in the afternoon. People work. I mean, who's going to be able to go? And all of these people show up and then just talk down anybody that says anything different from them. So what's literally happening is that we have this situation in which our First Amendment rights are being hijacked by people like this superintendent who won't superintend. She won't take over control of the board. The library board just sat there like this.
Yes.
Nobody did anything about it. And these people are being allowed to hijack our First Amendment rights to speak out when we don't agree because we're bullies and whatever category they're going to put us in. It's got to stop. And we have to stop. And God bless Laura Parker for doing that,
Yes.
because we need about 27,000 Laura Parkers to get out of the hole that we're in right now. So that was my story and I'm sticking to it. Go ahead.
No, you make some really good points there. And I would say part of what you're talking about is I'm not sure people really look at the history and do some research on who their school board candidates are. Because the school board president at Western Heights, her name's Brianna Flatley. She's a 29-year-old woman who she went through school at OU on a Gates Millennial Scholarship, which is from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She was actually the campus-based leader for that program at OU. She also is the Oklahoma City Metro Organizing Specialist for the Oklahoma Education Association. One would assume that would be a conflict of interest that may have precluded her from having that seat. So she's actually working for the organization organizing around the city for the teachers union. She seems to have been sort of handpicked to obey. She's a Western Heights graduate. Her former teachers and administrators. That's not a leader who will represent the parents in her seat 1 district. Another one was a gentleman named Braden Hunt, also very young. And I'm not saying they can't do a job because they're very young, but neither of these people have children in the schools there. He recently said in a non-doc article, we, the board, wouldn't be able to move off of him, Dr. Mernon, as an administrator because the teachers would revolt. Teachers would be very upset with us, end quote. That statement alone says the power has left the board.
Yeah.
And that young gentleman, he just graduated with his master's from Iliff School of Theology, and Iliff out of Denver. They are an LGBT, and I'm quoting from their site, QIA plus community. They are very much steeped in the deconstruction movement. That's who's representing the parents there. So, and I could go on and on. Other members, one that was even appointed by Kevin Stitt during this takeover to be someone who actually had kids in the school and to represent parents, has gotten to the point where he abstained when Paul Stafford, the Carmen Devereaux drag queen, was hired in a school board meeting, along with Flatley, the president. So these people, I think it's an equally intimidating environment sometimes on the board. And we have to have extremely strong parents take over those seats if they're going to get their voice back. I mean, this slide was about sort of revisiting that role of teachers. And part of what I'm learning in this, I've always thought this, is it a conflict of interest for teachers to speak at a school board meeting? They are employed by the district. The school board meeting is supposed to be a place for parents to be heard. In fact, it may be the only place that parents will be heard within the process of their child's education.
Certainly publicly.
Yes, for sure. So we're talking about school board policy here. Should we be specifying in these one-year teacher contracts that they must listen in these settings because they are the service provider and they should be listening to the consumer and taxpayer of their that's paying for their services? The other thing that really jumps out is these community partnerships are the gateway for this ideological infiltration. The organizations involved with schools, whether it's through grant money, after school services, or just in the way that we saw in this board meeting, do they represent the values of the parents? Did the parents have any say about these organizations being involved?
Well, that brings up a good point. And one of the people that follow us asked me the other day to start doing some research in nonprofits that are providing grants to public schools, because I can tell you for a fact, we've already done research on this, and I actually went before an interim study
Okay.
on not last year, but the year before last. Senator David Bullard asked me to do an interim study on the sex education programs that we're doing in Oklahoma, and all of the nonprofit or all of the sex education programs that they're doing in Tulsa are all provided by these highly politicized, same type of thing that you're talking about. We're talking about here, nonprofit organizations. So how does the state school board, how do you go to this before the state school board and say, hey, this has to, well, they're nonprofits. I mean, what are we going to do about that? They're a nonprofit. We can't, do anything about that. And that's the trick here. And I think you bring up a really, really good point. And I think, maybe we even need to work on this together, but we've got to start really trailing these people, these nonprofit organizations that are being funneled and allowed to give money to public taxpayer paid for schools to run their own curricula, their own stuff through these schools. That's not right. It should not be happening. And yet in the worst way in Tulsa public schools, it is with their sex ed program.
Well, we know, Jenny, not just money. Okay, so you mentioned money, but don't forget, we know that these organizations and other ones like it, that's how they're backdooring these books into these libraries by gifting them to the schools.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we're going to have a special on that next week. So watch for that, because we have a whistleblower for that. So be watching for that video coming next week.
Oh, I will be watching for that. It also has a lot to do with always following the money. These organizations are coming through a lot of times through federal grant money, that kind of a thing. There's a layer of money in Oklahoma public education that incents school districts that if you're going to be bad, you should just be really bad, because there's money for school improvement.
Yes.
If you fall in the bottom percentiles, you get extra money, and then you automatically get extra money, and then you can apply for extra money if you're one of those qualified schools. So that's why you see in a lot of these failing districts like Western Heights, they are very top heavy. They have layers at the district of jobs of people that are not in classrooms, that are beyond the superintendent, assistant superintendent level, that other folks don't have. But we don't really see that any of that is translating in the data to student achievement. Another thing that I noticed from them with the abuse within school boards, the abuse of the executive session option within school boards is killing transparency about these discussions, about these hires. Anytime that they don't want to be out in the public talking about a decision you're making, they go into executive session. It used to be far more rare because schools were very cognizant of appearing transparent. They don't care anymore. I think that's a huge deal. And the notes from executive session, you don't get to know what they discussed, what they knew about these people before they hired them. Also, attorneys are always in those executive sessions. And we see a trend from the very same attorneys serving all of these big districts about policy that runs against what parents would be voting for if they had a say. That's definitely a part that needs to be looked at. And then the last thing I wanted to make sure I got in, there's something called an instructional coaching model going on in public education. So now we have this layer of folks who are working data. They're supposed to be working with teachers. They're supposed to be tracking student progress at all time and working with teachers to coach up teachers for better student outcomes. In the case of Western Heights, and I would suspect other districts, although I haven't looked at this, there are people being promoted to instructional coaching jobs. Again, not an in-classroom regular, you have 25 kids all day position, who are not qualified or are part of a progressive ideology that has seeped into the school. So the woman who called out the progressive organizations, she's an instructional coach. Several of the people that spoke at the meeting, they are instructional coaches. The idea for instructional coaching, and some districts do it very well, I've been told this, but the idea is that the best of the best teachers are helping younger teachers to develop and therefore raise student outcomes. It's being misused, this model.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So a lot to be learned. There's more to come from this.
Well, and Julia makes a really good point too,
Julia's
because
comment.
remember, when we did the attorneys for Stillwater Public Schools spent over $40,000 to keep Stillwater Public School Board members from apologizing to Bryce Chaffin. That's all we wanted in our lawsuit. That's it.
Wow.
We weren't suing them for money. We weren't suing them for this or that or the other thing. We just wanted them to apologize to him for trampling his First Amendment rights. That was it.
Mhm.
So Stillwater Public Schools literally spent over Michael has did a FOIA request and got the bills. And they literally spent over $40,000 preventing school board members from making an apology. Those $40,000 were your tax dollars. That's where that came from. So they take our money and use it against us. It's absolutely, the system is so back-asswards. I don't know. I mean, how do you write it at this point? I mean, we literally have our own taxpayer dollars being used against us to do things that are against what most people in the district want.
You're absolutely right. I'm so glad Julia made that point, because in all of this, I want to make a point. It feels like we are picking on teachers. We're not. We're outing fact that are happening in some concerning districts. At the same time, we have many good and concerned teachers who are whistleblowing to us behind the scenes. And it goes even deeper than what Julia is saying. The attorneys that the taxpayer dollars are paying for in these school districts are actually working against people reporting within the system concerns about child safety and inappropriate hires. And what they know, this is what I'm being told by multiple people who are teachers inside the district. If you come forward and say, I'm concerned about this, or this person's spending time alone with a child, we don't do that, or I know this about this person's background, I'm concerned about this hire, they bring in the attorneys to investigate, and they press down on something gets filed against the person trying to keep children safe, who has to then get their own attorney, and they know that a public school teacher cannot afford to fight it. So they drive them out of the system. And there's not one of these, there are multiple just coming to this publication. So you have to believe that this is a systemic way to protect these people and allow them to continue to be in the public school system.
Sure that there are some good superintendents out there as well. But I mean, clearly the superintendent at this school, I don't know how she could be for parents or children. I mean, I literally don't see it. Oh, and Laura makes a good point. This is lawfare. I mean, it really is. They will use our resources, their resources, which come from us, against us, and turn the attorneys, on us. So, and, we're also, Michael takes, contacts from parents and teachers, as well. So we're just happy for, parents and teachers contact V1SUT, parents and teachers contact Michael or me. We'll get that information out, and more people. We have a huge audience this morning, enormous audience this morning. And part of the reason we do is because people are starting to see that this is happening and they want to know what to do. And I'll tell you, Laura Wood Parker what we have to do is find a Laura Wood Parker in every school district who's willing to stand up and put on that armor of God and say, do what you want. I don't care. Because then she'll get people who are going to come in behind them. But until that happens, these people are going to bully us and then paint themselves as a victim. And this is what's going to continue to happen. It literally has to stop. It has to.
Well, I'm actually very encouraged by a couple of things. The people who are on this broadcast and the incredible comments that are so engaged, that's doing nothing but growing. So I'm very thankful for that. But also, there was a watershed moment this week when the state superintendent of education, Ryan Walters, made an announcement that they are thinking out of the box as to how to tie student performance, traceable, comparable student performance to the accreditation process for districts. If you had told me that was even going to be brought up a year ago, I would have said it's an impossibility. So that's a very big step that allows a deeper look into what's happening. So we can all think and support that effort.
Well, yeah, because I know for a year, when we fought against Common Core, we had the teacher leader effectiveness system, which is still in place right now. And it blocks good teachers from being able to do what they want to do because they have to make so many reports that it's like, well, how do I even teach? Because I'm testing and reporting. Right. Wow. That's not teaching. They're verbs, but they're not, teaching. And, teachers have complained, oh my goodness, when that went into effect originally, teachers were contacting us constantly. This is terrible. And not only that, it kind of funnels teachers into the way it was explained early on was this teacher leader effectiveness system was kind of funneling them into more progressive types of education. And the better you were at these progressive types of education, the better your scores were. So you've just seen, which is what we said about Common Core initially. We said, look, the more the government gets involved in this, the worse scores are going to get, the worse things are going to get. And guess what? We were bing 100% over the target, because notice that when they start, even though we repealed it from law, they've been doing it ever since. I mean, and parents just got exhausted and quit fighting it. But there's still Common Core math, there's still Common Core reading, there's still Common Core everything in Oklahoma. And you can see the visual effect of just how crappy that whole system is, and how government just implodes on anything that's good and shoves it down, because our proficiency scores are what, Visit? I mean, what are they just kind of in general? 32% proficiency for reading, I think, is kind of the general average for the state.
Yeah, that's pretty close. And when you think about a place like Western Heights, so Oklahoma, as of the most recent data, the 21 year, ranked 49th in education quality, there's an Education Week indicator. You guys know about that. And there's several of them, so they may be up or down a notch or two in states. And if you think about Western Heights are truly toward the very bottom of all districts in Oklahoma, they are the worst of the worst. These children statistically are doomed. We cannot let that continue.
No.
Okay. Any other part of this you feel like we didn't cover? I've enjoyed.
One more slide.
It's probably just promoting the publication for anyone.
Well, we need to promote the publication.
For anyone who's out there that hasn't seen it, visit with a 1 instead of an I at substack.com is the publication. And anyone who wants to communicate with the publication, connect at visit.com. That email is on everything we do. We want to hear whether you agree, whether you don't, whether you say we've said something correct or you need to correct us. We're very committed to truth. So we want to hear from all sides of this.
Well, let's kind of recap on this, and just with you being so deep in this and have done the research that you've done, can you maybe pop off 4 or 5 things or however many you can that parents can do, immediately, or even beyond that needs to be stopped, that we need to get the Oklahoma State Department of Education, to stop, like this locking of the building so parents get in. I mean, Michael, you've been fighting that for forever.
Yeah.
In
Yes.
Edmond.
Yep.
Yeah.
There have been all kinds of things are happening that would have never happened 5 years ago. They're taking down portions of their website. For a bit, it was access to the school board members. That cannot happen. There are laws that protect parents' rights. And I think it's about parents asserting those rights at this point and demanding to be heard. I would say be very mindful at your own school site. Ask those questions. Research who's with your children. I think the big message of what came out of this story is parents really understand now that their kids are not necessarily safe within a building of all certified teachers. That is a terrible thing to say. I hate to add stress to any family during this time in this country's history, but you cannot be assured. The other thing is, one of the school board seats at Western Heights went for 220 votes.
Yes, I'm doing an article about that, as a matter of fact. So thank you for bringing that up. Yes, I'm doing an article about that specific thing, the low percentage of voters in school board races and in school bond issues. Yeah. As well. We want to complain, but then we don't want to go out and vote. And by the way, it is kind of your problem whether you can say, well, I voted. Well, you go out and talk to your neighbors, go down to whatever store, put notices up places and say, don't forget to vote. I mean, you do have an ability to influence others. Let's just not be lazy and let's use it.
Exactly. A lot of these people on school board seats end up going after the primary. They're unopposed. And people don't know much about them and rarely do they vote. So I would say engagement is a huge issue. And I'm excited that if there's anything in telling the truth that can engage more parents in the process, it was worth the effort. But that's Dana's also saying about parents need to know there's a Parents' Bill of Rights in Oklahoma.
Well, and I was just typing out, you can find the full Parent Bill of Rights on our website. So if you want to go to our website, we have a parental rights tab, go under the parental rights tab, and you can find the whole bill under there. So if you're not convinced you know what your parental rights are, go look that up, go to the website, look it up, you can find it. And if you need to, you can always just print that out and take it to a school board meeting and say, hey, by the way, I have the right to look at all of this. But I do want to point something out before you hop off of here, because I'd love to hear your take on this. So sure. We had a friend in the Edmond district whose son was being given one of these surveys that it's one of the new things that Joy Hoffmeister started before she left school, climate survey. That's what it is, a school climate survey. And these school climate surveys were being given in middle school. They were literally taking kids out of instructional time to give them a survey about what was going on in the school, what was the climate of their school. And the questions were just completely nonsense. Things like, are any of your friends taking drugs? Do any of your friends own weapons? Have they ever brought a weapon to school? Things like this. And so the mom was like, oh, well, I want to know what's in this survey. So she literally used her parental rights to go to the school and say, she emailed her school board member. She got with the principal at the site and said, I want to see this survey. Oh, well, you can't, because it's copyrighted and we're not allowed to allow that outside. I'm not joking. This is what was told to her. We're not allowed to have that outside of the school, but you can come in and look at it in the office. So she says, okay. And she goes in to look at it in the office, and no joke, there were like 3 different administrators kind of hovering over her while she was looking at this. Well, it's copyrighted, and so we have to be very careful. Well, what was she doing? She's like, oh my gosh, she felt, like they were going to hurt her or something almost, because they so intimidated her. just taking her parental right to go in and look and see what was in this survey. So this is how bad this is. And a lot of parents don't even know that because they haven't even used their parental rights. But I'm telling you, parents, you have so many rights. They're all on your side. And all you need to do is go take them back, because what these administrators are asserting isn't in law, it's in policy. And as Michael and I said the other day, what do we say, Michael, about policy?
Policy is just their own method of how they're going to conduct business. It does not override our constitutional God-given rights in any capacity.
Well said. Well said. So yes, I would agree about that. I think we're in a fight. The fight for parental rights is now the fight to reestablish transparency. And I think another thing that maybe journalists understand that your average parent hasn't had to deal with, anything that happens under taxpayer money, which means everything that happens at public school, is subject to open records requests. If teachers are even chatting about school, about something that's happening at school, planning, doing, that is school business, even if it's on their private phone. Even that, emails, everything that happens related to those schools is subject. They are public records, subject to an open records request. If you are concerned about something, there's actually an organization, which I'll give it to you, Jenny, and you can post it for folks to come back when you post this, that helps people with making open records requests. You don't have to be a journalist. You don't have to be a politician to have access to those records. So if they won't show you something, slap an open records request on them. Make them show it.
That's Michael's job at Rope, is doing open records requests.
There you go. So Michael's your man. So there should have never been a question about seeing that survey.
And since we have so many people on here, I want to expand on that just a little bit. The thing that the schools do that they've just absolutely perfected is they make you sign a contract, fill out a form, go through some type of process that you acknowledge. They're going to charge these fees, and these fees are exorbitant. That's their deterrent to keep you from filing requests. There's nothing in the Oklahoma Open Records Act that says you have to engage in any type of contract or form or anything to get records from the school. I just simply, at this point now, I send in a request. They say, oh, you have to go fill out this form. You have to go comply with our board policy about how these records are released. I say, no, I don't. Give me the documents, or I'm going to turn them over to the Attorney General and say, you're not giving me the documents. I mean, that's kind of at the point to where I'm at now. And you cannot let these schools bully you, because the caveat in the whole deal is there's nothing that there's no time limit as to when they have to give you these records. But what they're doing is they're deterring you by saying, oh, it's going to be $750 if you want those emails, or it's going to be $1,000 if you want, a copy of this curriculum or whatever. Just say no. Just keep sending them in. Keep saying there's nothing that in the law that says you can treat me this way. I'm asking, you have to give me the documents. You just have to be persistent.
That is great advice. They will even try to slap you with just a copy fee. Well, let me tell you, everything's digitized now. They should be able to email you anything that you want in a very short period of time at no cost.
So take him a thumb drive.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. So
here's your thumb drive. Just download them on that. Takes you 15 seconds. Here you go.
I invite myself there in person. I'll make a request. They'll deny me. They'll say, oh, this, I say, well, why don't I just come and sit down with, whoever it is, and they can just show me just person to person, that will stop them all. That'll make them want to give you the documents a little bit quicker, because they do not want you in that school sitting next to, the school's CPA or treasury person or teacher or, HR person or even administrator. They do not want you in there. So just invite yourself in. Say, hey, I'll just come in there and look at the records myself.
And if you want to stop the practice and not just get that one particular document, a lot of the state reps have been pretty good about, you go to them and they can put pressure on that school. They're right there in your area. That should be part of their job. They should be advocating for you as constituents. So I think everyone should be on a regular line with their state representatives.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, but I think the other thing that Dana says, they think district policy is superior to state
Yeah,
policy. Well,
exactly.
policy means nothing when compared to the
Yeah.
Constitution. So I think that's even the bottom line. So when they start attacking you for doing something, or they're not respecting you at a school board meeting, you just say, hey, it is my constitutional First Amendment right, which trumps everything in here, to be able to be heard for this 3 minutes or whatever that your policy says. I'm just, trying to be nice to you to do that. I mean, most people don't even know what our rights are. And
Yeah.
that's what's killing us. We don't even know what our rights are. So when somebody says, well, you can't do that, like you can't say something on a public sidewalk, that's all bull. That's just stupid. You absolutely can. It's public property. Public property means that you paid for it with your tax dollars. If you paid for it, you are part owner in it. If you're part owner in it, you get to express your First Amendment rights. So we have got to learn what those rights are. We've got to be willing to stand for those rights, and we've got to be able to push back against anybody who believes that for some reason we just don't have those.
Yep. I completely agree. And if this story about hiring practices and policies at Western Heights has engaged more people, I think it's a great thing. And I see a lot of grassroots parent movements popping up that are doing just that. So I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, Visit, we always love having you here, and we're just such huge supporters of yours. You've just done yeoman's work. Please support her in any way that you can, always reach out to us. We're happy to get any of your information out at any time. So thank you again for being on with us today, and I'm sure we'll have you on again probably soon.
There's much more to come. So thank you very much. And for all the work your organization does for parents.
Well, it's going to take all of us, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But the fight
absolutely will. So thank you again for being on with us, and we will talk to you again very soon.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye. All right, to wind up for today, thank you so much for everybody who is on.
Well, and I want to tell Laura real quick, because she just posted a message there. Contact me. Send me an email to my email, michael@rope2.org. Send me an email, and let's get on that request for what you're looking for there at the school. I'd be happy to help.
And there's your address, michael@rope2.org.
Yeah.
So thank you again for being with us. Thank you again for supporting what we do. Thank you again for supporting what Visit does. And if you've taken anything away from this, anything, the whole idea is you are the parent.
Right.
Stand up for your parental rights. You have the right to stand up for your parental rights. Do that. If you don't feel like you can, get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to help you with that. So, hope, Michael, you gonna have a great weekend?
No, because now I'm after watching this deal, seeing those pictures. I mean, it just literally sends me through the roof. So I'm gonna think about how I can be on the attack even more.
Well, and I was telling my husband this after. He goes, well, what are we going to do this weekend? I said, well, I don't know about you, but I've got 3 research papers to write.
So,
well, and that's the other.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, follow Visit, follow, Rope. And, if you want us to do research on something, please let us know. I know Visit's the same way. Just let's stick together. We shall overcome, as a famous person once said. So have a great weekend. And we will see you again on Wednesday, where Michael and I will be talking about the tax credit rules that came out. So that we had the private school tax credit, essentially. And the rules have come out. I've been studying them. Michael's going to study them. We're going to talk about them on Wednesday. So if you have any questions about that, or you want to chime in on that, please watch us on Wednesday, and that's what we'll be doing. And then on Friday, we've got Janelle Shellum from Edmond Public Schools. Well, she's not with Edmond Public Schools. She's a parent in the district of Edmond Public Schools who has been going through all of the books that her children have been reading and all of the books that have been prescribed for reading. And she's been writing book reports. And you're going to want to see what she's found. And because, again, parental rights, if you don't want your child reading a book that has been assigned, it is your right to say, I do not want my child reading this book. We'll need to make alternative arrangements. How can we do that? So, please recognize that those are your parental rights, and Janelle will be on next Friday to talk about the books. Anything else, Michael?
Yeah, I have a whole list, but if I start getting into it, we're going to be here another 30 minutes, and I don't want to do that. I just want to tell people.
Hit a couple.
Well, the most important thing with these schools are they've been firewalled, okay? That they've removed the parents, they've removed our access from, pretty much everything in especially in the case of our school board members. Our school board members are, they're recruited by these school districts, to go in, to run, they promote them, they back them. And they're just another piece, but they are our representative. That's our only avenue, really, into these schools. So we have got to stay vigilant on these school board members and then replacing them when the time comes. We could talk forever on that, but also, the left wins. This whole agenda wins because we allow it, because they bully us. Like you said, they're the biggest bullies on the block, period. They will not stop. So we have to we've been complacent all these years, and that's why all this stuff has come in, because we've just allowed it to happen. Well, we can't allow it anymore, because if we don't, it's never going to turn around if we don't stand up. It's up to us. No one's going to come in and save us. There's no overarching law or even president or even Ryan Walters. If we don't do it, if we don't do the work and show up and get behind people like Laura and rather than one voice there, do you think they'd still do that if there was 500 people standing there like that? No way. So, it's just, we've got to just show up, and we can make all the changes. We don't need someone to save us.
But you made that point. I'm going to say that again. Yes, Ryan Walters has been, out there and hammering away on so many of these issues, but it's not his job. Don't sit back and go, oh, well, now that we've elected a superintendent who's doing something, we'll get this taken care of. No, it's up to us to do that. He can't come into these districts that we're in and kick all these people out. He can do what he can, but the state school board has a specific job, and our job as parents is to take care of the districts that we're in. So don't get complacent. I mean, yes, we should support Ryan when he's doing the right thing. Absolutely, 100%. But make sure that you understand that it's not his job, and we don't just sit back because he's been elected. We are the ones that are in charge of our child's education. We're the ones in charge of the schools in our districts to make them function the way we expect them to function.
Yeah,
so,
100%.
All right. Well, and Dana says, no, the work is just beginning. He's there to assist. Our work is local. Speak up. Love you, Dana Mooney. Yep. All right. Okay, so we will see you again on Wednesday. And you guys, thank you so much for being with us today. And we will talk to you again on Wednesday.